when money stops meaning anything. Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering your life savings can no longer buy groceries, not because you were reckless, not because your bank collapsed overnight, but because the number in your account simply stopped meaning anything. It sounds extreme, distant, unreal, but history says otherwise. In 1946, in the city of Budapest, a mathematics teacher walked to the market before class. He had spent his life teaching equations. Precision was his craft. He believed in structure and logic and disciplined saving. He held government bonds. He trusted the state. He trusted the currency. At the market, something felt wrong. Vendors no longer wrote prices in ink. They used pencil, sometimes chalk. Prices changed before noon. Inflation in post-war Hungary accelerated at a pace almost incomprehensible. At its peak, prices doubled in hours. The teacher understood exponential growth on a blackboard, but he had never felt it in his kitchen. A few streets away lived a widow, no financial education, no theories about monetary systems. Her late husband left her two assets, the apartment she owned outright, and a small pouch of gold coins passed down through generations. She did not predict hyperinflation. She simply held what was tangible. Within months, the teacher's bonds were redeemed exactly as promised. He was paid every unit owed to him. Those units just no longer bought bread. The widow's gold, however, was accepted everywhere. Her apartment retained value because shelter remained scarce. By the end of the crisis, she could have purchased the teacher's entire building. Same city, same collapse. Two radically different outcomes. The difference was not intelligence, it was asset selection. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people resist. Economic crashes rarely destroy wealth. They transfer it. Think of wealth like water. When a river changes course, the water doesn't disappear. It floods new land and leaves the old riverbed dry. When currencies weaken, assets do not reprice evenly. Essentials adjust fast. Salaries lag. Bonds remain fixed. Pensions appear stable, numerically. That lag is where purchasing power migrates. A worker paid once a month cannot outrun daily price increases. A retiree with fixed income feels squeezed quietly. A business owner who can raise prices daily adapts. The system does not explode immediately, it erodes. Look at the early 1920s in Germany. Urban professionals saw life savings evaporate as the mark collapsed. Yet farmers who controlled food supply gained leverage. Food demand did not vanish with the currency. Decades later in Zimbabwe, similar dynamics unfolded. Productive farmland retained barter value. Exportable goods preserved real purchasing power. Paper currency did not. Across continents, across political systems, across centuries, the pattern repeats. Collapse is rarely a cinematic explosion. It is arithmetic playing out in slow motion. And today, many economies carry record levels of sovereign debt. Promises stretch decades into the future. Pension systems assume optimistic growth. Governments face obligations larger than projected revenue streams. There are only a few ways out. Grow faster than history suggests possible. Default openly or dilute quietly. The first is difficult. The second is politically dangerous. The third is subtle. When the measuring stick shrinks, everything priced in that stick appears to rise. But the rise is illusion. This is not about predicting the exact date of a crash. It's about understanding the mechanics of transfer before it becomes visible. Because once it becomes obvious, repositioning is expensive. And this is where most people are standing in the old riverbed, convinced the water will never move. But what happens next will change everything. When currencies fracture, wealth does not scatter randomly. It flows into specific reservoirs. History keeps pointing to the same five. The first is productive land, not speculative plots, not empty acreage waiting for a developer. Land that produces something essential. Food, energy, resources tied directly to survival. During the monetary chaos in 1920s Germany, city residents traded heirlooms for sacks of potatoes. Farmers accumulated assets, not because they were financially sophisticated, but because they controlled production. Food demand has a biological floor. People eat in prosperity. They eat in depression. They eat in collapse. When currency weakens, food becomes currency. The second reservoir is monetary metals. Gold and silver are not magical. They do not generate cash flow. They simply cannot be printed at will. Their supply expands slowly, constrained by geology rather than policy. In the 1970s, during severe inflation in the United States, gold rose from $35 to over $800 per ounce within a decade. Gold did not transform. The dollar's purchasing power changed. Gold became a mirror reflecting currency dilution. In countries from Argentina to Turkey, families who quietly held precious metals preserved purchasing power while those holding only local cash watched numbers grow but value shrink. The third reservoir is operating businesses with pricing power. Not every company survives inflationary stress. Many fail spectacularly. But businesses that provide non-optional goods or services, energy distribution, staple foods, medical care, can adjust prices rapidly. The speed of repricing determines survival. If your income adjusts annually but prices adjust weekly, you lose ground. If your revenue adjusts daily while costs lag, you gain relative strength. During repeated inflation cycles in Argentina, essential goods distributors updated prices constantly. Salaried workers absorbed the gap. Business owners consolidated assets from distressed sellers. Inflation is not neutral. It favors those closest to the pricing lever. The fourth reservoir is foreign currency exposure. When local currencies weaken, assets denominated in stronger currencies rise automatically in local terms. During the Asian financial crisis of the late 1990s, several Southeast Asian currencies collapsed while dollar-denominated assets surged domestically. But this cuts both ways. Foreign currency assets protect holders. Foreign currency debt can destroy borrowers. When exchange rates shift violently, liabilities grow faster than incomes. Many who borrowed in foreign currencies learned this painfully. The fifth reservoir is strategic real estate. Not speculative bubbles, not over-leveraged developments, but property in locations where demand is structurally durable. Brick and concrete do not vanish when currency shifts. Replacement costs rise with inflation. Scarcity remains. However, leverage determines fate. Owners without heavy debt often survive and even benefit from revaluation. Owners carrying foreign-denominated loans frequently collapse under expanding liabilities. Same asset class, different structure, different outcome. There's also an overlooked sixth category, skills. In modern crises like the one experienced in Venezuela, electricians, mechanics, and medical professionals were paid in goods, foreign currency, or barter. Their expertise retained value because broken infrastructure and human health do not wait for monetary reform. Meanwhile, salaried employees tied to fixed pay saw purchasing power evaporate despite receiving full nominal income. The pattern is clear. Assets tied to physical necessity, scarcity, and independent utility endure. Assets that are promises denominated in weakening currency erode. Bank deposits, bonds, fixed pensions, salaries, technically honored, functionally hollow. And this is where the video takes a shocking turn. When monetary systems strain, who absorbs the shock? History answers with uncomfortable consistency. The middle class? The wealthy typically diversify across asset classes, land, businesses, international exposure, metals. Scale provides flexibility. The poor often hold limited financial assets to begin with. But the middle class builds stability on currency-denominated instruments, savings accounts, retirement funds, government bonds, employer pensions. They trust the measuring stick. When that stick shrinks, they stand directly in the river's path. After the hyperinflation of the early 1920s in Germany, professionals and retirees were devastated. During Latin American debt crises, middle-class savings were wiped out while foreign capital returned, later to acquire discounted assets. Statistically, median wealth falls sharply during monetary crises. Average wealth recovers faster. Inequality widens. It is the fingerprint of transfer. Today, global government debt levels are historically high. Demographic pressures strain pension systems. Healthcare obligations grow. Growth rates in mature economies are modest. There are three broad paths forward. Explosive growth beyond historical precedent, explicit restructuring or default, or gradual currency dilution. The third option is politically easiest. Governments can meet obligations in nominal terms while reducing real burden quietly. Payments continue. Statements arrive. Systems appear stable. But purchasing power shifts slowly. This is why crashes rarely look like movies. They resemble prolonged erosion. A decade of 6 to 8% inflation quietly halves purchasing power. Asset prices rise, creating the illusion of prosperity. But essentials climb faster than wages. The gap widens. Psychologically, humans anchor to nominal numbers. Seeing account balances rise feels reassuring, even if real value declines. This cognitive bias delays reaction. By the time concern becomes mainstream, repositioning costs more. The teacher in post-war Budapest trusted the system because it had always worked before. The widow trusted tangible assets because they required no institutional promise. One relied on policy, the other relied on physics. The next crisis may not resemble past collapses. It may unfold as persistent inflation rather than dramatic hyperinflation. It may appear as policy adjustments, digital transitions, new monetary frameworks, but the mechanism will be familiar. Wealth will move, the river will change course, and most people never hear the next part. And that's the real danger. Preparation is not panic, it is positioning. Owning productive assets, holding stores of value independent of policy, developing skills that command immediate demand, structuring liabilities wisely, diversifying exposure. These are not extreme strategies, they are historical patterns. Because when the measuring stick weakens, numbers become deceptive. Real wealth is what sustains you when promises thin out. So ask yourself, if the river moved tomorrow, would you be standing in dry ground or rising water? If this perspective shifted how you see savings, security, and risk, stay with us at Economic Tales. Understanding history is not about fear, it is about clarity. And in uncertain times, clarity may be the most valuable asset of all.